So now that we have our floor, walls, and ceiling and floor textured, we're going to create a light. And you can do that by right-clicking the orthogonal view, and that gives you a list of all the entities that you can add into your map. And so light is found here. You click it there, and I'll put it roughly in the center. Now, lighting in Doom 3 is different than any other id game in that there is no setting for some sort of global ambient light level. You actually have to go through and light your level well. Now, a bad way to light your level is to create one light with an enormous light radius. The way that Doom 3 works is if you have overlapping light volumes, and light volumes are depicted by the pink triangles here that surround the light. If you have overlapping light volumes, then that will really impact your frames per second. If you want to alter the properties of a newly created light, you can select it and press J to bring up the light editor. And you'll see that by default, equilateral radius is checked, and that the default radius is 300. Now, if you make a change to that radius, because we have equilateral radius selected, that change will happen in all directions. So if I cycle through my orthogonal view, you'll see that the light has indeed changed in all directions. Well, if we want to alter the dimensions, the volume of a light, but have different radii for each direction, we can do that by unchecking the equilateral radius box and then typing in individual values. So let's do something like 200, 200, and 150, and then click Apply. And we'll see that in the orthogonal views, the X and Y have a radius of 200, while the Z only has a radius of 150. Now, Doom 3 lighting really consists of a lot of lights that have very small radii, for the most part. That's how lighting is done, and that's the way to do lighting well. But since this is really just a tutorial that focuses on map making, I'm not really going to cover lighting extensively at this point. That will be a video tutorial for a later date. So we'll just do some very basic lighting for our very basic map. To do that, we're going to go ahead and close the light editor, and we're going to move the light to the corner of the map. We're going to hit spacebar to clone, and we're going to now select both lights and clone both of them by hitting the spacebar. And so now we have 4 lights. And if we want to see exactly what this is going to look like in the game, we can press F3, and you'll notice that we have our render is black, and that might be frightening, but it really isn't. All we need to do here is update the render data by pressing F7. And now we can see exactly what we would see. This is how the map will be lit given these light sources. So I'm going to move the light slightly and update the render data. And you can see now that this is how our map will look when it is. Now, before I go any further, I want to talk about the render modes that we just switched into. We went from a camera preview, which looks like this, to seeing how our level would look properly lit in Doom 3, like this. Now you can access all the render modes under the View menu, and you can see down at the bottom of the menu all of the various render modes and their keyboard shortcuts. So you enable the render modes using F3 as a keyboard shortcut, or you can use the menu selection. The difference between render mode and real-time rebuild is that by default, without real-time rebuild, any changes to textures need to have a rebuild render data manually applied in order for you to see the changes take effect. So here's a quick example. If I select this wall and then I select this texture, we would expect the texture to update, but it did not. In order to get it to update, we can press F7, and now the render data has been rebuilt, and we can see that that texture did indeed change. On the other hand, if we use real-time rebuild, we can go here to the View menu, real-time rebuild, select this object, and now I'll make a change. And you'll see that the instant that I changed the texture, the render data did get updated. So I'm going to fix these changes really quickly by selecting the walls that I want to change the textures to. I'm going to change them back to this texture here. I've selected the walls, and now I'm going to middle click, and you'll see that the texture that I middle clicked on has been applied to the selected brushes. Another option in the rebuild menu is to render the light outlines. By default, you can't see the center of the lights here like you can here in the orthogonal views, but you can click Render Light Outlines, and now we can see the entity points that make up the lights. And this is really useful for selecting lights when you're making changes and going through and really lighting your map well. It allows you to select lights very quickly.